driven. For us, it's about the community. So everything that we do ties back to how we are able to empower our communities, be it women runners, be it our athletes, be it people like you and me across different ages who are running. That's the essence. And these runners sort of become influencers for our event and de facto influencers and ambassadors of the event. So for us, when we also talk about broadcast, for us, what takes prominence is the storytelling aspect, which I think both of them spoke about, and where cricket today is moving. But for us, from day one, that has been the essence. Because in our country, distance running is only 2 decades old. That for 20 years, we've had the sport grow. So for us, an elite participation has only so much relevance and connect with the audience. So when our broadcast also, and our races are broadcasted on Sony, and Riddhima has been part of that for the last year or so, 20 or 30% of the entire broadcast covers the athlete journey, who are the international athletes coming and running, what is it that they do. But rest 50, 60, 70, 80% talks about the people like you and me, everyday people who have taken up this sport for various reasons, the human interest aspects of that. Philanthropy is a very big aspect when it comes to distance running. The impact that that has had at the back of events. Sponsors who take up sponsorship, not because they need viewership, but because they are able to connect with these real people. So I think that has been the essence of storytelling for us throughout. And interestingly, this is very unique for India. For a race like a London Marathon or a New York Marathon, the elite race takes prominence. That is what people are looking for. But we've realized in India, we could not have done that. That one format, one race doesn't work for us. So even on race day, when you have the kind of people who participate, the demographic is quite interesting, right from a 12-year-old to perhaps an 80 or a 90-year-old who's participating in our event and has that emotional connect with the event. So that diversity is also something that we have tried to bring in our broadcast through all our races.
Rika, hello. Women in on-ground sports reporting, still a rarity. There have been times where it's just me and you. But how have you seen the landscape change, and where do you think it's still headed?
Well, firstly, many congratulations to Sharmishta and Boria for putting together a high-performance facility for sports journalists. And this is really new, and I just hope that you go from strength to strength from here. To answer your question, Gargi, yes, I am a first-generation broadcast sports journalist. When I entered I can give you a story. For the first time when I had entered a press box in a skirt, I was told, well, that's not the decorum, that's not the attire you should be coming in. Get dressed in a man's clothing to enter a press box. From there to having all of you in the press box today is really a very pleasant change. Today, as we covered the World Cup, I can tell you there were 5 of us who were constantly there throughout all of India's games, and it's a massive change for me. And it's also a very pleasant change for me when you talk about women's participation. Gargi, what I feel today after having worked for about 23 years, that every day when we go out, we not just have to be the best woman to be doing our job, but the best man to be doing our job. You cannot be questioned on the content you bring in. And I'll also have to really tell you how we as journalists are a little different from the broadcasters and content creators. Now, when you look at content creation is to get your reaction, your clicks. But what is journalism? Journalism is giving out news. It's like a postman's job. You post news. You do not editorialize. You do not give additional information other than what is needed. My former boss, Dr. Pranay Roy, used to say, you are like a postman, so go out, post the news. And that's where I feel lies our value. And also in today's day and age, when journalism has pivoted a little bit, adding context to content is very important, and how intelligently you're able to add context to content will define the kind of storyteller that you are.
Beautiful answer, Rika. Ashok, I'll go back over to you. In the long term, What do you think will define success for broadcasters?
I think beyond all the aspects that all the panelists have spoken about, I think the one other big change is personalization. I think what's increasingly beginning to happen is that you've got to personalize the content or the broadcast for the viewer. The expectations are changing. So, I've been involved with regionalization, for example, and to tell you a small story, if I can, when we started out the IPL broadcast in the Telugu language for the first time, we had first-time broadcasters speaking in Telugu and commenting and calling out cricket. And one of the commentators came from a radio background, and he said that the batsman has hit the ball is traveling high, it's traveling even higher, the ball has gone and kissed the cheek of the air hostess on the plane. In the control room, we were shocked. We were shell-shocked, saying, how can someone say something like that? In fact, the head of the business turned on his heel and walked out, saying, what nonsense is going on? 1 week later, when the results came in, Telugu was the #1 channel. What does it tell you? And then, we started deep diving to figure out what exactly is happening. And we realized that Telugu is the home of RRR and all those big blockbusters, right? So entertainment is the buzzword, and therefore what they want is not so much stats, not so much strategy, but entertainment. And therefore, that's a small example, but jokes apart, I mean, it's really going to be about how you can customize it. Today in the digital world, you can get data by individual, technically speaking, and therefore how do you kind of almost personalize the feed to one particular cohort. I think that's going to be the future.
Brilliant story. And Ridhima, I want to get into your brain now and understand, like you said, not only are you competing with AI influencers, but also shorter attention spans. How does a presenter stand out?
That's a very good question, because that is something that you have to really rack your brains on. And what Ashok just mentioned is the fact that, not only did it happen in Telugu commentary, it happened in Bhojpuri commentary, it happened in Haryanvi commentary, all of it. The more massy you were in your lingo and your analogy was even more bizarre and shocking, that actually flew. And that's how creator economy is also working. You'll see a lot of creator economy saying that you need to shock me so that you get my attention span. As presenters and broadcasters, and Rita was touching upon the fact that, as journalists we are separate, I feel today the lines are super blurred. It's because you may have context, you may have knowledge. Now you have to be intelligent enough to shock people with that knowledge, at least have a hook so that they come and listen to you. I think as a presenter, one of my biggest jobs right now is to work on that aspect of creativity, because I know the game, I've been in the game for now 10 years. But the question is that how does my storytelling change? Can it still be a Harsha Bhogle style of commentary and storytelling, and will it still captivate audience? Maybe, maybe not in my case, maybe not in somebody else's case, because that person is sort of catering to a Gen Z audience, I'm catering to a millennial audience, Harsha is catering to a different kind of audience. So I think my creativity today, and it was always the case, by the way, when I was with Star Sports and they were training me, the one thing they really trained me and sort of paired me with my co-commentators was to practice my opening line. I think we boil down to that now. Your opening line has to be so creative, so shocking. What do you pick out on that you get that attention? Because otherwise, if you simply start with, you've got an RCB versus an MI game, it's going to be a blockbuster. We are here at Chinnaswamy Stadium. It's something that everybody will say. But today, what can you do different? Probably start in their regional language, and that is also done too much. So what do you do? So I think that is where the creativity lies, as to how does a presenter open the show.
Can I add to that? I think what really counts today is how you bring in the latest news, modern context to what is happening. So if you are commentating on a game, if there's an election going on, if there is a rally of Vijay going on outside, I know a lot of times broadcasters are asked not to bring in politics to the sports field. And I know for this, during the World Cup, whistles were banned in Chennai because it is Vijay's party's symbol. So they couldn't bring in whistle. So I don't know in what way, but as a journalist, I could bring in. So, whistles are not banned. So they were leaving the whistles outside. They bought the whistles, but they were leaving it outside.
I actually completely agree with Rita. And I feel that as broadcasters, we have to now understand which they are. They are okay with creators doing it, but they're not necessarily okay with your presenter who's on their board doing it, right? At some point of time, there is going to be a time where your pre-show, your mid-show, and post-show that you do for broadcast will be redundant. Because what new are you doing? You're neither getting in any shocking element. And that's the reason why when 2019, when ICC hired me as the digital presenter, they garnered 2 billion views, kid you not, right? Because we were making story about everything. We were making story about a cat that entered Edgbaston, you know, and that's where the story, and we related that to the game. And that kind of viewership, a pre-show and a post-show and a mid-show is not being able to do. So somewhere you have to be flexible, even with your presenter, because presenter brings in credibility. Broadcasters bring in credibility that not necessarily a creator can get. So along with credibility, you have to be okay with them going a bit further than the boundary lines that you've created, so that your pre-shows, post-shows, mid-shows, and your major television broadcast is still relevant. And I completely agree with her that whatever is making news, get in that, because then you are actually expanding sport to a viewer that is also watching politics. You're also expanding sports, say there is something that is happening in wildlife. And if I can get that, you're expanding your new audience. So you should be allowed to do that.
Like, I'll tell you, on the day, you know, India was going under lockdown in the second phase of COVID, there was a match happening, IPL match happening in Delhi between Delhi Capitals and Rajasthan Royals. And while IPL commentary was, you know, in a certain tone, it was talking about the excitement and all, outside Delhi was getting locked down and no one was talking about it. And I found it completely bizarre as a journalist, you know. There were 40,000 people inside the stadium. Delhi was going under lockdown, and IPL seemed all celebratory even in that moment.
Brilliant insights from both of you. And Somnath, I'll go over to you once again. Can you talk about integration of, let's say, something like an IPL in South Africa? Cricket is booming right now. We've done multiple shows together. Tell us about it.
You know, Gargi, Ashok, Rika, Ridhima all spoke about, you know, context and personalization. You know, the fallacy of a boardroom situation always remains that success becomes the biggest endorser for innovation. But somewhere I think to that point, you know, IPL integration of an SAT20, which is their version of the IPL, will have limited legs if you talk about the entire African context point of view. And hence, that might not yield us enough gains in terms of both commercial as well as audience viewership viability. But having said that, if we can pick up the right sports narratives in each of the countries, I'm not sure how many people here do know of that. In terms of sheer numbers of households that reach gets calculated in Africa, Z is number one in that entire continent with 43 million homes reach. So we speak to bringing in the context of relevance. I think as long as the content has soul, it might just touch upon all points of relevance and personalization. So to pick up the right battles, then it becomes a question of viability that comes in from a broadcasting point of view. So to answer your point, if we can tell the right story about an SAT20, which is an equivalent franchise of an IPL, might get better traction than to replicate an IPL or try to build the same over there. That's my take.
100%.
Yeah. You want to add something?
No, I completely agree with him that there is we kind of copy success. And because we are in an age where only creativity is going to get you attention, you know, we are fighting for attention, declining attention span, and more importantly, the amount of time in which you can tell storytelling. As a presenter, I'm not only competing with the fact that, you know, tomorrow you've got a creator coming in. I'm also competing with the fact, actually a brand that came to me and I did some work for them. Their one takeaway from the work that I did was the fact is that you're not speaking fast enough. You know, so you're also competing with speed.
That's a unique
right?
problem.
That is a unique problem.
Yeah.
So all kinds of those innovations have to come with every, and now you don't even get innovations in a decade. It's faster than that every year. So I think we should just stop copying success like that.
Absolutely. Neha, final question to you. How are you seeing the evolution of mass participation sport, especially with the digital sports consumption? Evolution of mass participation sports, like the marathon. How are you seeing the broadcast evolution?
I think, like I said, broadcast for us is only one aspect. And I think everybody touched here also about how digital and, how that new age media is moving forward. For us, it's been a very interesting aspect because we are heavily dependent on organic content. There are brands and creators who strive to do that. We've been fortunate simply because of the nature of the sport that we are in that lends itself to organic content. Today, a Tata Mumbai Marathon or a Tata Steel World 25K has about 25 odd participants. Each of them are creators in themselves. Each of them have a story to tell. And that story is a journey of 5 to 6 to 7 months. So throughout the year, we are able to have a digital ecosystem. And what that does for the community, the running community, each one is an influencer. What this does for brands is that they have an opportunity to connect with their audience at the most needed moment. For example, when you're training, the most important thing is hydration. Bisleri comes in at that point, what is the hydration intake? How much should I drink? So I think it's a very unique place that we are in. And today, distance running is one of the fastest growing sports in our country. Every day you have at least 15 to 20 people who are taking up the sport. People have realized how easy the sport is. And they have also realized that what it can do to you as individuals. It's not just about fitness anymore. It's about how the sport has managed to create a social, cultural shift in our mindsets towards health and fitness, towards better community, better living. So I think it's just the beginning and we have a long way to go.
Absolutely. That brings us to the end of this session. Thank you so much, everyone. A huge round of applause for the people who bring us the stories that stay with us long after the game is done. Thank you, everyone.
Gargi, for what you do.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Gargi. Thank you.
Requesting the esteemed panel to stay on stage as I call Kaustubh Jha of Thumbs Up for the felicitation purpose. Ladies and gentlemen, a huge round of applause. Sports broadcast and the way ahead. A rare session that you see in a conclave of a stature like this, where you have sports person, you have athletes,